So we've been talking about a group of issues, around this question about divine unity. And we started, and we'd already discussed this part from discussion 5, where Ghazali gives his objection to Ibn Sina's argument, or his attempt to prove that more than one necessary existence is impossible, right? And we already saw how this was based on the identity of indiscernibles, and the idea that if there were two necessary existents, they would have to be different one from the other in some respect. And that couldn't be in the fact that they're necessarily existent, because they're both necessary existence, so they have to be different in some other aspect. Which means that there would be two things that you could say true about them which are different. One, that they're necessarily existent, and the other, whatever it is about them that are different. Like the example we considered was the possibility of, like, say, one good and one evil necessarily existent, like in the Manichaean system, right, where there's a good God and an evil God or something like that. So now their objection was that this would constitute multiplicity in God. So that even this kind of multiplicity, that is the multiplicity that you would say is entailed by the fact that there is more than one thing you could say about something, would mean that that multiplicity would be objectionable to describe God with. Right? God has to be so simple that you can't even say anything about him, right, which is multiple, right? So, and this is where Ghazali is now opposing the philosopher on, right? This kind of plurality and the idea that God cannot be having plural aspects or more than one aspect, right, is, according to him, arbitrary. But we'll see in a little bit some more of that. And okay, we'll skip that one. We'll go to this issue. In discussion 7, the philosopher argued that God has no genus. What they mean by genus is as a part of the definition. So you know, in the definition of things according to the system, there's a genus and a species, as when we say the human is a rational animal. So that genus is the animal, it's like the large group, which the human being is a member of. And then rationality is the specific difference, right? Rationality is what makes humans specifically different, or specifies humans as different from other members of the large group animal, right? So any kind of definition of something, or to actually precisely say what something is, give a definition of it, is to always give its genus, name the large group which it's a part of, and then name the specific thing that makes it distinct and different from the rest, right? And so the genus would be like the description of something's essence. We're talking about what something is, and we're going to tell what something is. We're going to give a definition, and that will involve those things. So here they're saying that God does not have a genus. That means he cannot be a part of, or a member of a category of which there can be other members, right? So they give 3 arguments, and one refers to what we had already talked about, this issue of essence, the thing that we are interested in doing your paper on, right? Mahiyya, and what I just put here is whatness, because I think that's the nicest and the most clear word to describe what it is, whatness. Okay? So they say genus is a part of whatness, because the genus is what you have to give when you answer the question, what is it? So what is the human being? It's a rational animal. That is the essence, right, of the human. So you have to give the genus. Genus is part of that. But the first has no whatness. Therefore, the first has no genus. Why do we think that God has no whatness? Well, that comes in a later argument. But you can see how this argument that God has no genus depends on the argument that God has no whatness, right? Which we'll get to later. Then they say genus is, in one respect, part of a thing. So, for example, when we say that the human being is the rational animal, the genus, the animality, it's part of what the human being is, because the human is a rational animal. So they say it's in that sense a part of, right, the human being. But God is not a composite. God's not made of parts, right? He's not a unity of parts. He is one, unitary being, yeah? So therefore God has no genus. Now see how this depends on the idea that the genus, as part of the definition of a thing, is actually then a part of that thing. So that if we say that a human being is a rational animal, we have to say, oh, the human being has two parts, rationality and animality, right? The whole question then here for Ghazali against them is whether it's the case that that is actually a part of the thing itself, so that the thing that we're talking about has those two parts, rationality and animality, or if it's just part of the definition of the thing, part of the concept of the thing, and only an abstract plurality and not a real plurality, right? So, as me, as a human being, a rational animal, it's not like there's rationality and animality, and they got stuck together somewhere, right? So I can say, here's my rationality, here's my animality, and they put together now me. No, they're actually just two parts of the concept of what I am. They're abstract parts, but not real parts, right? Rationality is not something which exists on its own, and animality exists on its own, and then we put them together like we would, mix ingredients for cookies or something like that, right? Okay. So the third argument is that the genus of the first, of God, would just be necessary existence, or it would be something else, right? Yeah, what is God? Like, what is the definition of God? What is the major big category that supposedly God would belong to if he had a definition? Either necessary existence would be that genus, so that we would say God is the necessary existent which, and give the specific difference, what makes God different than other necessary existence, right? Yeah. But if the genus was necessary existence, then there would be no differentiate, because again, there seems to presume there can only be one, which is what's at issue, right? That was in the previous argument, the argument that there can only be one, right? So if we accept that there can only be one necessary existent as proven, then if the genus of God was necessary existence, there couldn't be any specific difference, because there's nothing else to specifically differentiate him from within that category, right? Okay. Now if it is something else, right, if the genus is something else, then the necessary existence would be subsistent in that something else, and then it would not exist necessarily, which is a contradiction. So let's say, for example, the genus of God was, okay, we could use the other one, a good being, right? So if someone were to say, okay, God is a good being which is necessarily existent, so that good being is the big category that he belongs to, the genus, and necessary existence is now supposed to be the specific difference, right? Then necessary existence would be something about God, right? That would be subsistent in God, and it wouldn't be the case that God exists necessarily. We could say this good being might not have existed necessarily, but it does. And so we don't have a necessary existence anymore, right? Necessary existent is the one that cannot not exist, right? That it must exist, or it's not possible to be otherwise. Okay. So, for the same reason, God doesn't have any differentiate. So the whole